There is a kind of suffering that has no adequate language. A darkness that survivors carry long after the war has ended sealed inside them like something shameful, though they are the ones who were wronged. Between 1961 and 1973, thousands of American and South Vietnamese soldiers, airmen, and civilians were captured during the Vietnam War. Some were held in well-documented prisons like the Ho Lo prison in Hanoi, known bitterly by its American captives as the Hanoi Hilton. But others vanished into something far more terrifying: the jungle. These were the jungle camps. Crude, brutal, deliberately hidden. Places where the rules of the Geneva Convention were not merely ignored, they were inverted, where survival itself became an act of defiance. To understand what the jungle camps were, you must first understand where they came from. The North Vietnamese Army and the Viet Cong needed prisoners. Prisoners were intelligence. Prisoners were propaganda. And in some cases, prisoners were leveraged bargaining chips for a war that both sides knew might never end cleanly. But transporting prisoners to established facilities in Hanoi was dangerous and slow. American air power controlled much of the sky. Roads were bombed. The safer option was to keep captives where they were captured, in the bush, in the mountains, in the sweltering lowland jungle. These improvised camps were built from whatever the jungle offered. Bamboo cages, sometimes barely large enough to stand in, earthen pits covered with logs and wire, crude huts shared between prisoner and guard alike. Because the guards, too, were miserable out there. Many camps moved. A camp that existed in one location for 2 weeks might be disassembled overnight and rebuilt 10 kilometers deeper into the forest. This constant movement served a dual purpose. It complicated rescue attempts, and it destroyed any psychological map a prisoner might build of his surroundings. Sergeant James Jim Pfister, captured in 1968 during operations in the Central Highlands, later described his first night in a jungle camp in testimony submitted to the Senate Select Committee on POW/MIA Affairs. They put me in a hole in the ground and covered it with bamboo poles and wire. I could hear the guards talking. I could hear the jungle. I thought, no one knows where I am. No one will ever find this place. That was the worst part, not the pain. It was the certainty that I had simply ceased to exist. Food in the jungle camps was designed to sustain, barely. The standard ration was a small cup of rice, sometimes twice a day. Often the rice was moldy, contaminated with rat droppings, partially cooked. Protein came, if it came at all, from insects. Whatever scraps of fish or meat could be added to a watery broth, or from animals prisoners occasionally managed to catch themselves. The medical consequences were severe and compounding. Dysentery was nearly universal. Malaria swept through the camps with no treatment available. Skin infections from insect bites, untreated cuts, and constant moisture turned into tropical ulcers. Wounds that ate through flesh to the bone and were, in several documented cases, fatal. Weight loss was catastrophic. Men who entered captivity at 180 pounds sometimes returned weighing less than 100. Their bodies had consumed themselves. The jungle also enforced isolation. Unlike the Hanoi Hilton, where prisoners developed elaborate tap code communication systems and maintained a command structure that became legendary for its resilience, many jungle camp prisoners were held in complete solitary confinement for months at a time. The nearest human voice belonged to your captor. The interrogations were not random cruelty. They were systematic, patient, and aimed at extracting specific information. Unit positions, operational plans, the names of informants, the location of supply routes, but they were also something else. They were psychological warfare designed to break identity, to turn the prisoner against himself. The rope trick, a technique documented extensively in survivor testimony, involved binding a prisoner's arms tightly behind their back at the elbows, then hoisting them by those arms until the shoulders dislocated. Former prisoners described the pain as unlike anything else, a pain that bypassed conscious thought and became its own universe. Others described being forced into stress positions and left for hours in the jungle heat, being submerged in water, being beaten with bamboo rods, being placed in wooden stocks and left to bake in the sun, unable to adjust their position, unable to swat the insects crawling over them. What made the jungle camps particularly brutal compared to the established prisons in Hanoi was the absence of witnesses. The Hanoi Hilton, for all its horrors, existed within a system. There were North Vietnamese officials, Soviet advisors visiting journalists. There was at minimum a performance of control. In the jungle, there was nothing. No oversight, no record.